there are a whole lot of transfer quarterbacks out there. The transfer portal has been very active. The quarterback market inside the transfer portal has been doubly active. Some of these you know about. Others, I'm not sure you know about. Now, we're in spring practice season, but this stuff right here is going to matter. So this segment is going to be one of those rare evergreen segments where we could probably post it 3 months from now, and it'll still be relevant. Now, the first name I'm going to mention, we've spoken a fair amount about. But some of these names, I don't think we have mentioned some of these names at any point this spring, and yet these are guys, in some cases, that are going to have direct impact on conference title races or could win one. You look at Mackenzie Milton, which is the name I'm going to lead off with, but Jack Coan's at Notre Dame. Charlie Brewer is one. You know what? Let me not get ahead of myself. Let me start with Mackenzie Milton. As you look at the graphic there, Jesse's showing you. Was at Central Florida, now is at Florida State. Now, we went into their spring game, which was a couple of weeks ago now, and I said, all I want to do is see him run. I don't have any doubt about his arm. He didn't have an upper extremity injury or anything like that, but he had a very complicated knee injury and several subsequent surgeries. So that's one part physical, one part mental. And so we got to see him run. And as soon as I saw him run in their actual spring game, see, there's what he used to look like. If you're watching on YouTube, he was a guy, it's not going to run a 4.35 on you, but he's plenty mobile enough to move the pocket. It's part of his game. It's a very, very complimentary and effective part of his game. If he doesn't have that, forget it. Jordan Travis is going to be your guy at Florida State starting at quarterback, and could still be. But if Mackenzie Milton did have that, I told you, if we see that in the spring game, I'm going to feel really good. I'm going to feel way better than 75% odds that he takes that job. Well, we saw him. We didn't see him run around a whole lot, but we saw him have to run a couple of times, enough to where I looked and I said, okay, he can move. He can move. Now, those odds of me feeling more confident in that knee go up drastically. They're not 100%, only because one run in a spring game does not equate to 12 weeks of potential wear and tear. But here's what else you get. What else you get is, we're in April right now, May, June, July. You get another 4 months before camp starts, and then you get to manage him favorably in camp to where you're 4 or 5 months further removed, and hopefully the integrity and structural integrity, at least of that knee, is to the point where it's a non-factor. If you've got it from the neck up, it's a non-factor. His best week, if you listen to the folks around Florida State, talked to one of them yesterday, his best week of practice was the one leading up to their spring game. So he finished with a bang. He looked really good. He looked more than adequate in their spring game, to the point where if he's already comparable in your mind with Jordan Travis, then you think you add another 5 months on of fully becoming familiar with the ins and outs of this offense. I think he's going to be the guy. That's my opinion. I think if there's no setback over the offseason, the what season? The offseason. If there is no setback over the summer, I think Mackenzie Milton's going to be the starter there. At the very least, it's going to be a very spirited quarterback battle. Jack Coan. Now, this is a name that you didn't hear last year because he didn't play last year. But the year before, you know what he was busy doing? He was busy taking the Wisconsin Badgers down to Indianapolis, Indiana, where they got a lot of snow this week. We got snow in Nashville. I got sunburned the other day, and we had snow that night. But when Jack Coan went to Indianapolis, it wasn't to play in the snow. It was to play in the Big Ten championship game, because he took Wisconsin there. And then he didn't play last year. And now he is transferred to Notre Dame. So this is a multi-year starter. He's got a lot of reps under his belt. Seems like he's got a lot of mileage under his belt. Ian Book felt like he was 28 years old when he finally left Notre Dame, and or he was out of the picture at least. And so now you've got Jack Coan in there. I'm trying to get myself excited about it. The reason I've had a hard time getting excited about it is because Jack Coan in and of himself, even though he has had really good numbers, he was a 70% completion guy that year that they went to the Big Ten championship game. Having said all that, this is not one of those ready-made, just drop him in the bucket, he'll have everything else in there he needs type situations. Offensive line's kind of a question with Notre Dame. Wide receiver's a question there. And so he does not have this stable around him of racehorses ready to run. We just got to find the right jockey. It's not quite that. Quarterback in and of itself is kind of going to need to be a weapon for Notre Dame. And I don't know that I view Jack Coan as a weapon necessarily. And not to mention, I know a lot of you fancy the Notre Dame schedule as soft. It's not. It's not. This year alone, I don't know if you guys know this. I think I said it the other night. They start at Florida State. Week 1, it's a Sunday night, which always throws our late kick broadcast schedule for a loop on the opening weekend. But I'm not complaining because we get Notre Dame, Florida State on a Sunday night. They play Wisconsin. Hello. Where did he transfer from? They play Wisconsin. They play Cincinnati. Beautiful draw right there. Then they go to Virginia Tech. Oh, by the way, those 3 games I just mentioned, back to back to back. Wisconsin, Cincinnati, at Virginia Tech. Then they play USC and North Carolina back to back. So it's not an easy schedule by any stretch, and it is hard for me to endorse any Notre Dame playoff hype merely because of Jack Coan. Could be wrong. I've been wrong before. I'd be happy to be wrong again, but I'm not endorsing that yet. The next one's the most fascinating one there is. Charlie Brewer is a name familiar in Big 12 circles or if you're a diehard college football fan. But if you just watch a lot of Florida football and you don't really tune in much, you do not remember the name Charlie Brewer in all likelihood. Well, let me refresh your memory. Charlie Brewer was a multi-year starter at Baylor. Charlie Brewer was a guy that got Baylor into the Big 12 championship conversation in 17, 18, and 19. He was money. Started as a true freshman. He was money. 2020 comes around. They got a new staff out there. COVID totally guts the roster, and Baylor football's not all that great, and Charlie Brewer's not all that great. Well, he has transferred now, and he has gone to Utah. And we did not preview the Utah spring game the other day, and shame on us for not doing so, because all Charles Brewer did is go 15 of 15. He threw for like half a mile or something like that. And I know that this is not necessarily a stat sheet kind of format in a spring game, but I had our stats and info department crunch the numbers. And that is a tie for the best completion percentage in the history of spring games, 15 of 15. So it's 100% is what it comes out to. And they tell me you can't do better than that. So at the very least, again, at Utah now, we've got a quarterback battle. Because Cam Rising is a name that, I don't know, like 3 months ago, you would have thought would be the starting quarterback for Utah. This is a situation, and it always is at Utah, where you know without having any clue about a single name on the roster, it's Kyle Whittingham, it's Utah, they're going to have a really solid, viable product. But then what would happen if you put a legitimate quarterback in there, and let's just say some of those anonymous names overachieve relative to what typical Utah standards would be? What would happen? Well, they'd win the Pac-12 South. That's what would happen. They're a bona fide contender there. That's a team that's just as likely to face Oregon or whoever the North spits out as Southern Cal is. Southern Cal is going to get 10 times the hype and the love in the preseason for obvious reasons. But that one's one to really keep an eye on, because that's one that could be felt and have sort of a ripple effect outside of just Salt Lake City, Utah. And last but not least, does anyone know who Jack Abraham is? Sounds like a National League umpire. Jack Abraham was at Southern Miss, and he was good at Southern Miss, but you probably didn't know it because it was Southern Miss. Now he's at Mississippi State. And this is yet another situation where it snuck up on me. I didn't, well, nor did you really expect this transfer or that transfer to happen. But Jack Abraham had a good thing at Southern Miss. Aside from the white balance they do, or the lack thereof on their game feeds, as you can see right now if you're watching on YouTube, you got to go on the road if you get good white balance for Southern Miss football. But I'm not here to talk about their multimedia department. God bless those people. I'm here to talk about the quarterback, who is now in Starkville. So they have their spring game last week, do the Mississippi State Bulldogs. And you got that kid, Will Rogers, who you probably remember from last year going into Georgia and pushing Kirby Smart and company to the brink. They lost the game, but you walked away, if you were like me, thinking, dude, that Will Rogers kid was pretty good. Hey, at the very least, KJ Costello's out of here. You got Will Rogers in, a nice preview of the future. And maybe it still is. But then all of a sudden, you're flipping through ESPN 19 last week, and there's, oh man, Will Rogers looks pretty good. And you hear the voice in your ear. That's not Will Rogers, friend. That's a guy named Jack Abraham, not the National League umpire. Jack Abraham from Southern Miss. And he looked phenomenal. And here's what everyone around Starkville was saying afterwards. You know, that's a classic Mike Leach quarterback. And once upon a time, there was a guy named Gardner Minshew who came in as a grad transfer at that point when Leach was at Washington State. And he came in, and here's what happened. Just a perfect sync. One of those, again, perfect cross-section matches of talent and staff and system, and he blew up out there. And a lot of people are hoping that that is duplicated, albeit this time at Mississippi State in the SEC West. But Jack Abraham looked really good. I didn't expect it. No one expected it. I don't even think half the Mississippi State fan base expected it. But now we got it. So a lot of quarterback battles now have been born and will be waged over the coming months because of the transfer portal. And keep in mind, we're probably not done there. So we're coming out of spring. And once we get out of spring, again, it's widely expected that that number is only going to go up. And as a result, we may have to do another segment just like this one down the road.